And the way I put it in the book, and when I would teach seminars about these things, engagement is not what happens in the conference room. Engagement is what happens in the heads and the hearts of the people who inhabit the conference room.
Mm.
And if you look at it in terms of, well, if we put people in the room, we've engaged them. Good, that's done. That's very different from saying, what can we do to make sure people are truly engaged, that we truly can tap into that incremental effort and energy.
Hey, everybody, I'm Elizabeth Swan.
And I'm Tracy O'Rourke's sexy sister, who only comes out when Tracy has a cold. And apparently that's happening more and more now that I'm getting older, Elizabeth.
Bring it on, sister.
Yeah. And we're from the Just in Time Cafe. Welcome to our podcast. At the cafe, we wrestle with tough questions. We talk to groundbreakers. We discuss awesome books. And we get insights from Lean Six Sigma leaders and practitioners who are making a difference in the world.
Me and Tracy's sexy sister will let you in on helpful apps. We'll bring you the news and we'll challenge the status quo so you can build your problem-solving muscles.
Elizabeth, what is on the cafe menu today?
Oh, Tracy. Today's highlight is our interview with best-selling author John Guaspari. We're going to discuss his latest book, If Engagement is the Why, Then Respect is the How. And we'll quiz John on how an aerospace engineer ended up writing what could be a how-to guide for the lean tenet, respect for people. For Hot Apps, we'll explore an offering from your local library that's free and worth thousands. And the question for today's Q&A, continuing with a theme, we ask, do traditional hierarchies make it harder to foster true respect between leaders and employees? So Tracy, let's explore why respect isn't just nice to have, it's how the world actually works when it works.
Up next is Hot Apps.
Today's app is Libby, which feels like it could be the name of your favorite aunt. I am playing catch up with this one based on the number of people who have referenced it for years now. I should have had this a long time ago, but I lost my library card, which kind of sounds like a grammar school excuse for not doing your homework. I actually went to our local library a lot because my mother was a voracious reader right into her 90s, and she was constantly demanding one of her daughters go pick up the latest satchel of bestsellers coming up on her wait list. But it didn't occur to me until this episode that I could simply ask for a new card. And the rest was ridiculously easy. Took them under 5 minutes. Now I wish I'd set this up for my mother as well. So I went on libbyapp.com, LIBBYAPP.com, and it asked if I had a card. And I said, yes, I do. Of course, very proud now that I finally got one. Then it asked me to enter the name of my library. Fun aside, our library is called CAPE Libraries Automated Materials Sharing, which is awkward, but turns into the acronym CLAMS, or clams. And I live on Cape Cod, and as an avid clammer, I find that hilarious. So it said, welcome to clams. And it asked if I wanted to sign in with my library card or get a card. You need to do one or the other to borrow titles or put books on hold. I entered the number on my new library card. And if you have a PIN or a password, you can enter it. And since I'm first-time user, I created one. Gave me a digital library card, which listed loans, 0 out of 5, holds, 0 out of 15. Then it asked me if I preferred to read with Kindle. It could connect me directly to the app. I skipped that. I like, a physical book, honestly. But the other thing I like is audiobooks. So I scrolled to that, and it referenced over, 1,000 titles. Today's author, John Guaspari's book, is not at the library yet. It's just out. So for fun, I searched on last month's book, which was Switch by Chip and Dan Heath. And even though it's an audiobook, there was only one copy available, and it was in use, and 2 people were waiting for it. So I put a hold on it, and it gave me an estimated hold time of 6 weeks. But strangely, it jumped me to the front of the line. So apparently they know that I am a VIP. So Tracy, do you already have a card, and were you more interested in Kindle or audiobooks or something else?
Okay, Elizabeth, I'm going to be honest. When you told me but we're going to cover this app, Libby, and you gave me the digit or the app, it asked me, do I have a library card? No, I don't have a library card. And in my head, I just remember thinking when I was a kid that I had a little card like this that I go to the library for, right? And I kind of assumed I had to like go down there and get the card, right? So kind of threw me off. And I was like, when am I going to have time to go to the library right now? I don't have time to go to the library. So anyway, turns out you can get the card online, which also tells me that maybe they need to call it a library account now, not a card, right? So I thought, that's kind of, something from the past that maybe doesn't apply anymore, right? But anyway, whatever. So, but I'm going to be honest too, Elizabeth, I am not the way I learn and process information. I know this about myself. If I only have audio, I don't do so good. That's just not how I process and retain information. So I'm not a huge fan of audiobooks unless even when I'm in the car. Like a lot of people go, well, yeah, you're in the car and you're commuting. No, I find myself having to keep like going back and going, what was that part? What was that part? So I am much better with book in hand, even digital books to me aren't, I'm still, and maybe I shouldn't be accusing the library of not coming into innovation because I still like book in hand too. But anyway, so that's a little bit about my preference, but I really love the idea of tapping into the library. So if anything, I found my local library here because I didn't even know where it was, honestly. So anyways, I am going to make it a point to tap into Libby and look at some of these resources because I'm kind of excited about having free magazine articles or potentially renting movies from there. So, you know what? Why not look into a resource that's available that I just need to make a little extra effort, and now I don't even have to leave my house. But the library here is really beautiful, so I should just go there for a walk or something.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I can't really cast any shade on you for not, knowing where your library was or not having a card on account of, like where I was at. But yeah, libraries are like we have a beautiful library in Boston, Boston Public Library. I went to school nearby and I loved going in there. Man, it was just a stunning building, these big lions out front on either side of these really august steps all up to it. So the having more interaction with my library is exciting to me. And I think this will probably turn on, like you said, you can start to explore like, oh, what other things can I get through this app? I think the one that lets you get to the movies is called Canopy. Canopy. What am I thinking? Kanopy. Looking at it, it didn't dawn on me. It's Canopy, just spelled differently. Well, I dove in and I looked at a sample audiobook. I have to like the narrator. So I once listened to Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code, and the narrator was so bad, it turned the book into a comedy and not a very good one. So for Switch, the narrator sounded, kind of stiff. And it made me wonder if it was an AI voice because I recently learned when I'm doing my, audiobook, narrating my own book, that you can do that. You can have an AI narrator. And then, once you listen to a snippet, the book gets a little tag, physical tag looking on it with a slice of cake on it. So it tracks which books you've sampled, right? Kind of funny, sampling cake. And then it asked me what I wanted to do next, since I could look at, similar titles. And that was enlightening. It showed me books like, Charlie Duhigg's Power of Habit. And I was having fun scrolling titles. Not that I can entertain any more books on my list, which is incredibly long. So I don't know, Tracy, what's your next step on Libby? Do you think you're gonna dive in there, or maybe just go to the physical library and appreciate physical books? Where do you think
I
you're gonna
actually
go?
have it on my list to go visit the library this weekend because it is a beautiful area. So, and then I was thinking maybe audiobooks, receiving and being the user of an audiobook isn't for me, but I'm thinking that somebody might need an audiobook created by Tracy O'Rourke's sexy sister.
Oh, now that's an avenue I had not considered. I know a certain book coming out soon, Tracy, that your sister, the Tracy Sexy sister, might be interested in narrating. So let's let's think about that. But for me, it just opened up a window. Like I was thinking, hey, I could sit in my reading nook in my office and just play a book on my speakers, or I can stick this on my phone and listen at 3 a.m. when insomnia strikes. I could take one of the books on my list, access the audio version, and then use my printed copy to take notes when I want. Probably need to think through that process a little bit. That sounds kind of clergy. Bottom line, I could turn Libby into a new bad habit, Tracy.
Yeah, I don't know if it would be a bad habit. I think it sounds like a good habit. And I also heard some snippets of your creativity and innovation around developing a better process for you to absorb digital books better. Because I know you love the in-person handheld books too. But what I'm hearing is some innovation from you. Not that that's a surprise, Elizabeth, about how to do this process better to enhance your learning. So you go, girl.
Oh yeah. Thank you, Tracy, sexy sister. And everybody go out and get Libby if you if this appeals. I think it's a free, simple, great app. I'm Elizabeth Swan, and you're listening to the Just in Time Cafe podcast. In a short while, you'll get to hear Tracy's and my interview with John Guaspari, a former aerospace engineer who wrote best-selling books about the soft stuff.
Up next, it's Q&A.
Today's question is, do traditional hierarchies make it harder to foster true respect between leaders and employees? I have some knee-jerk reactions to this, so I had to sit with it a second to entertain other reactions. And Tracy, you and I once worked with someone who relied heavily on the rigid boundaries of hierarchy, and I think we had maybe one more employee than we did actual levels. I recall him once describing a new employee as insubordinate, which kind of sounded like, this was a military operation. And my impression was that people did not feel free to speak their minds. So yes, that experience left me with the impression that traditional hierarchies definitely made it harder to foster respect. But then I remembered reading Humble Leadership by the late Edgar Schein and his son Peter, who we interviewed here at the cafe. And he had a phenomenal case study of humble leadership in the US military. And his point was that respect was always based on relationships. So it depended on how the person above chose to relate to those below him or her. And in the example he gave, the leader spent time hanging around the crew of a nuclear submarine and asking questions because he was new. He didn't know the ship that well. It was honest curiosity, and it helped him get to know his people. And that's respect. What do you think, Tracy?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of articles about this. And my belief is I don't think hierarchy plays a role in disrespect in and of itself. I think it's kind of irrelevant as a specific factor. But what I think is relevant is the leader to direct report ratio. So sometimes, especially when people are cutting positions, they tend to cut the middle. What's the point of the middle? They have all these mid-level managers that sometimes get axed, but what ends up happening is now the leader to direct report ratio goes up. And if you've got 100 people reporting to you directly, how do you spend any time, any quality time with, showing people that you can support them? So I think some organizations are really good at mapping out the leader direct report ratio and making sure that they don't go above that, because they recognize that that is part of respect, is, making sure that your direct leader can make time for you. So I think that is more important. And I think that's where people feel disrespected, is they feel like they're being ignored, that if they had an issue, they may not have time to communicate that. One-on-ones get canceled. That doesn't feel good, right?
No. This is such a great point. And you know that part of leadership obviously is making that time. And so we always say, make time. This has to be scheduled. You can't just sort of hope you run into people. But you're pointing out, well, if your leader to direct report ratio is bad, you don't have a shot at that. So that particular ratio could be the undoing of a culture of respect, right? And
Mhm.
people might want to blame hierarchies, but flat organizations also struggle with respect if there's poor communication or there's unclear roles, because respect is less about structure and more about culture in daily interaction. So I did a quick search and I found an example from Zappos, the online clothing and shoe retailer, and they adopted something called holacracy, and it was a flat management system. They did that in 2014, and the model removed conventional managers in favor of self-organizing teams. And what happened was many employees reported confusion. They didn't feel clarity about their roles. It was difficult to make decisions. People reported their voices weren't heard, despite this promise of kind of egalitarianism. And then transition led to the departure of about 18% of employees in that first year. And people cited lack of clear leadership and respect for individual contributions. So flattening a hierarchy doesn't automatically result in mutual respect. Without clear processes and accountable leadership, employees can feel lost or unheard or undervalued. Um, so that kind of speaks to another aspect, right? Not just the ratio, but the format, right, Tracy?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And so, I did work at GE back in the 90s. It was a very flat organization. And as a matter of fact, I was frontline, right? So I was frontline helping customers. And there were only two people between me and Jack Welch, right? So it was my boss who reported to the president of GE Appliances, and the president reported to Jack. So there was only two. And it was extremely flat. And I had a good experience because, there's essentially two levels, right? There was a lot of leaders in my boss's position to help manage that organization. And, people say, well, how do you manage people feeling like they have a path forward? Well, how GE did it
Mm,
was they expected you to move around every 2 years, and you openly discuss that with your manager. And how
mm,
many of us would be open to discussing that we want to leave our boss in 2 years? Like, so you're going to leave me in 2 years. What do you want to do? Like, who has that conversation? And it was really uncomfortable when I first got there. Like, what do you mean? I'm never going to leave you, boss.
yeah.
So
Um,
it was a great experience. And again, no hierarchy, but I don't think necessarily that was great, but
mm,
really it was that model of, I felt cared for. I felt like people wanted me to thrive. I had enough time with my leader. And, those are the things that are really important. I
mm,
think it's really easy to say, oh my God, look at all these levels of management. What are they doing? What do you mean? It's about people, right? So yeah, sure. You can cut all those people, but it's going to change your culture. I'm not a fan of bureaucracy, but I am a fan of relationships,
mm,
right? So, if these people if there's a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of hierarchy and everybody doesn't feel cared for, well, something's not going right. They're
mm.
doing it wrong.
Yeah, good point. They're doing it wrong. And what you just described, and I've heard you in the past, but it just dawns on me how intentional that culture was. And they had to work at that because anyone who's had any kind of a career would not feel comfortable with, okay, so you're leaving me in 2 years. So where do you want to go? Think about that. You're like, whoa. So, but that was intentional and that was respectful. So this turned into a fascinating question. It challenged my assumptions. The structure does not guarantee respect. It's back to that famous quote, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And the funny thing is, I always attributed that quote to either Tom Peters or Peter Drucker, uh, kind of longtime famous consultants. But the internet has gotten wiser with attribution and it advised me it was actually the same late MIT professor I referenced above, Edgar Schein. And that is a nice coda to this Q&A, isn't it, Tracy?
It is, and may he rest in peace.
Yeah.
I'm Tracy O'Rourke, and you're listening to the Just in Time Cafe podcast. We host these monthly, so you can go to www.jitcafe.com and go to our podcast page.
Coming up next, it's an interview with our featured guest, John Guaspari.
Elizabeth, do you want to do the honor of telling our listeners a little about John?
I do, Tracy. And I have a lot to say about John because he is a friend. He was a VP at the first consulting firm I ever worked for, starting back in the late 80s. John is a former aerospace engineer turned New York Times bestselling author and consultant who spent decades helping leaders elevate employee engagement across industries. He has written 8 books, including I Know It When I See It and the newly released If Engagement is the What, Then Respect is the How. And he created best-selling training videos and hundreds of articles on leadership, quality, and the intangibles that drive performance. And Tracy, I think you and I both use his video, Time the Next Dimension of Quality, when we consulted for GE. It's funny you just mentioned GE.
Yeah.
John is known for his ability to make complex ideas accessible and engaging, and he approaches everything with his signature blend of insight and wit, which I've always appreciated. John doesn't live too far from me in Walpole, Massachusetts. He likes to golf, go bowling. He's an obsessive reader, and he likes to avoid water sports. So what an honor to have John here at the cafe.
Welcome, John.
Yes, welcome, John. It's good to see you.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. Appreciate it.
Yeah, the cafe, it's big. We're expansive. We reach all the way out to Walpole, Mass. So we are here because you've got a new book out. You have always been prolific, so I suspect there's more books to come. But tell us what made you want to write this one.
What made me want to write this one? Well, it's kind of embedded in the title. The title is If Engagement is the What, Then Respect is the How. It's that employee engagement is a big deal, has been a big deal for a long time, correctly. It should be a big deal. But what I observed in my years of consulting was that the way a lot of organizations went about it was, not to put too fine a point on things, wrong. and what's in this, but it's a very short book, and what's in it are just some thoughts about why I think the way they went about it is wrong, some pitfalls to avoid, some ways to avoid them, just some things that have been kind of rattling around in my head. I retired 11 years ago. And these are things that were kind of rattling around in my head since I retired and saying, I really want to get these down on paper or on pixels and just offer this up as some observations about some of the pitfalls that are out there and maybe help some people avoid them.
So just to give us a little bit of a teaser, not that you have to give away the whole store or anything, but what have you been seeing? What was something that maybe you could say, okay, wrong, if you had to point one out?
Well, a lot of it starts with the way people view the word engagement itself. Engagement's a pretty common word, and it's often used to connote things coming together, like gears engaging. And that's a perfectly sensible definition of the word engagement. But what got organizations going toward implementing these serious-minded efforts to increase levels of employee engagement they saw these wonderful results they were getting in productivity and efficiency and employee retention. But the definition of engagement that's at the base of that research is a very different definition. That definition is the extent to which people will invest incremental effort and energy in the task at hand. That's very different from coming together. They may be related, but they're not the same thing. Can I give you an example?
Yeah.
Yes.
I I was doing some work with a vice president of HR of a large corporation on a completely different topic. But while I was in her office, she was having like a week later having a meeting of her top management team. And so she handed me the agenda, the draft agenda she'd been working on. She said, "What do you think of this?" And I looked at it and I said, this looks reasonable. Very sensible things were on it. But I noticed that penciled in on the agenda on day 2 from 1 to 3 o'clock, it said breakout sessions. This was written in. I said, "I noticed you've written in breakouts. What are you going to do during the breakouts?" She said, "Well, we don't know." I said, "Well, if you don't know what you're going to do, why are you doing them?" "Well, we have to do them. That's the engagement part of the meeting." So it was a 2-day meeting, and let's say it was 8 hours each. So 16 hours was going to be information bombardment, and 2 hours we're going to engage people. And that is a pretty stark example of what I think the problem is. That you think, and the way I put it in the book, and when I would teach seminars about these things, engagement is not what happens in the conference room. Engagement is what happens in the heads and the hearts of the people who inhabit the conference room.
Mm.
And if you look at it in terms of, well, if we put people in the room, we've engaged them. Good, that's done. That's very different from saying, what can we do to make sure people are truly engaged, that we truly can tap into that incremental effort and energy?
Yeah, it's kind of Tracy and I have recently been discussing kind of just being clear on why you're gathering, right? That it's often just becomes a what, like a breakout room, as opposed to why exactly are you in this breakout room? What do you hope to happen? And then I think you get into the bigger conversations that you're talking about, John. Go ahead.
No, I was going to, one of the things that I often talked about when I taught seminars, and this example's in the book, is I would put up 2 slides, or a slide that showed 2 different images. And in one image, you'd see what looked like an obvious 6 people around a flip chart. 3 people are sitting down. There's a person at the flip chart scribing. There's a couple of people standing up. There's sticky notes and maybe colored dots. We've all seen those sessions.
We all are invested in 3M.
Right. We all have stock in colored dots and sticky notes. And in the other picture showed a room, auditorium style, a bunch of people sitting in the front of the room with somebody with PowerPoint slides and somebody talking. And so I would say, okay, of those 2 images, in which room are people more highly engaged? And I asked that question hundreds of times to thousands of people, and 95% of the people would say, well, the people in the room with the flip chart. And very occasionally someone would say, doesn't it depend? And that's the correct answer. Because if the people with the flip chart are working on something that's important to the business, and it's also something that's very much in the mainstream of what they do, and if their experience tells them that the higher ups to whom they're going to present whatever it is that their recommendations might be will truly be listened to, that they will get a hearing, then yeah, they're going to be engaged.
Mm.
If, on the other hand, they're in the room and what's going through their heads is, didn't we just do this 3 months ago? And nobody's going to listen. And why are we? It's just a waste of time and paper. And why didn't I click on decline when I got the meeting invite? They're not going to be engaged. On the other side, the other room with the speaker, if the speaker is talking about something that's not particularly germane to the audience, and the speaker is not particularly skillful, no, they're not going to be engaged. But if he's talking about something that is germane to them, and he has enough skill to hold the attention of 100 or so people sitting in the molded plastic chairs that we usually find in bus stations or DMVs. They're going to be engaged. So it's not getting them in the room. It's what's happening while they're in the room and how it's affecting them while they're in the room. To your point, why are we gathering?
Mm-hmm. So I have another question. So your tagline on your book here is hard learned lessons from dealing with those pesky intangibles, the soft stuff. So what are you talking about when you say soft? I mean, people think about soft skills, but I don't know if that's what you're necessarily saying, soft skills or soft stuff.
In here, I identify four intangibles that I focus on, one of which is engagement. I also talk about empowerment and trust and respect. And I try and talk about how they're not random. They actually, there's a heuristic, that it's that respect begets trust, begets empowerment, begets engagement. And why that nice linear progression won't work unless you really understand what those words mean. And in each case, just as I did with engagement, I said, you got to start out with the right definition, or you're not going to get there. Similarly, with empowerment, if you start out with the wrong picture in mind, you're not going to achieve what you want to achieve. Can I give you another example about
Yes, please.
empowerment?
We love examples.
We love them.
Again, there's stories in the book. I saw a company that was giving the results of a survey that they had done of their employees, asking the extent to which their employees felt empowered.
Mm.
And the results were very disappointing. And the president, this was a multi-billion-dollar division of a very large company. The president of this division, a good guy, smart guy, well-intended. This is no, he's good. He meant well, was well-intentioned, but he got out. He was very frustrated, and he got up at the end of it and he said, and this was a meeting of his direct reports and their direct reports. It's about 120 people, but all of those people were pretty high up in a very large organization. And he said to them, you all need to understand that you are empowered. And I need you to go back to your people and make sure they understand that they are empowered. And I was sitting in the back of the room and I could see one of his vice presidents who was sitting in the front, who kind of started to put his hand up like he wanted to say something, then he put it down. Mm. And so the session broke up, and later on in the day, I had a chance to get that guy, and I said, it looked to me like you wanted to say something when Jim said, you got to tell your people that they are empowered. He said, yeah, I did. What did you want to say? He said, well, what I wanted to say was, we can tell people they're empowered till they're blue in the face, but if they don't feel they're empowered, they're not empowered. I said, why didn't you say it? He said, oh, no, too risky.
Yeah.
So the irony is that he didn't feel empowered, tell the boss that his approach to empowerment was wrong.
But you do a great job in the book tying that. You said you can't bestow empowerment. It's very tied to safety.
Yeah, empowerment is not just bestowed by leadership. You are empowered, like I'm knighting you or I'm blessing you. It's the definition. It all comes down to definitions. This whole book is about saying the language we use needs to be precise because these things are very tricky. So if we start out with the right vocabulary, you got a much better chance to get there. And the definition of empowerment that I recommend is a feeling of safety while exercising judgment on the job. Mm. If you feel safe while you're exercising judgment, you're empowered. If you're simply going down a checklist, you don't need to be empowered because you're not exercising any judgment. Mm. However, if you're going down a checklist and circumstances are such that you think that you maybe ought to deviate from the checklist,
Mm.
now you're exercising a judgment, and the question becomes, if I do this and I think my judgment is good, this could go south. I'll weigh the risks. If things go south, it's not going to be catastrophic, but I'll weigh the risks. Will my boss say, "Why'd you do it? Let's discuss it." Okay, I understand. Or will he rip my face off? And we've all heard those words. And
Yeah.
if the response is, "I don't want to do it because I don't want to get my face ripped off," that's not empowerment. And, so a feeling of safety while exercising judgment on the job, I think, is a step toward investing incremental effort and energy on the task at hand. If I feel safe while I'm exercising judgment, I'm more inclined to invest incremental effort and energy. In other words, if I'm empowered, I'm more inclined to be engaged.
Mm. Um, I'm loving the definitions that you've teased out for a lot of things and kind of like you're saying the heuristics and how these things actually work. And one of the things that it really struck me is your notions of trust and respect. And I've never forgotten, and you said this to me, I think, when you were writing it, that respect can be given presumptively, but can be lost. And trust should not be given presumptively, but can be earned. To see those as the two sides of this, I don't know, coin.
Well,
It to me that speaks so much.
yeah, that's, the definition of trust I give in the book is confident expectation. So if we all know what to expect and we're all confident in those expectations, there can be trust. Now, in order for that to happen, we all need to be very clear about what those expectations are. And I remember very early in my career when I was a young 31-year-old punk working for a electronics company. I remember one of my bosses at one point saying, "You got to stick a pin in it." That notion of don't let things be vague. Stick a pin in it so we know what. Are you saying you can't say, "I'll have it to you this week"? Well, when? Wednesday, Thursday, Friday? What, morning, afternoon? Be as specific as you can be. Set expectations. Everybody on both sides of a transaction need to set those expectations. And if you have those set and everybody's also clear about what happens if expectations are not met, because that happens, you can have trust. But yeah, I say no, trust should not be presumptively given. If I'm working with somebody for the first time on a project, I'm heading up a project team, and there's a new person on the project, and they say, "I will deliver X by Y date," I'm not going to say, "Okay, fire away," and not check anything. It's not that I think that they're a bad person. It's I'm not sure. I don't know. So I will, and I'm not going to be heavy-handed about it, but I'll build in a few checks along the way. How we doing with this? We still in good shape? Okay, great. On the other hand, if it's someone with whom I've worked a lot, and I know they have a track record of always coming through doing what they said they were going to do, good, fine. I don't need to check. So that person, but eventually that other person can earn that level of trust. Respect, on the other hand, must be presumptively given. I don't know how to operate in life any other way. To think that you need to earn my respect. Well, I cannot think of a more arrogant, pompous thing to say. You haven't earned my respect yet. Well, who are you to say that? Respect is, and my definition of respect in the book is giving due consideration to the other. And I know other is a loaded word these days.
Mhm.
But I think I'm okay because my definition of other in that formulation is everybody who isn't you. Not a group. It's not a demographic category. It's everybody who isn't you. Giving due consideration to everybody who isn't you. Now, there will be millions and millions of people that have nothing whatsoever to do with whatever it is you're doing. So due consideration means, all right, nothing. I don't have to think about it.
Mm.
But have you thought about what you're doing or not doing, what you're saying or not saying, how it affects other people? Did you take the time to think about it and adjust appropriately? Do consider it. I'm not saying you have to, put rose petals in everybody's path. It's a business. You have a business to run. But I am saying take a minute, take a beat, and think about it because it'll save a lot of problems down the road. I give an example in the book where a boss sends an email, an employee responds to a boss's request for some information, and the boss sends an email back that just says, not what I was looking for, with 4 exclamation points.
Mm.
And that sends the employee who received it into a swivet, and that employee then had to cancel his staff meeting and the ripple effect through all the rest, as opposed to the boss originally saying he could say not what I was looking for and put 9 exclamation points if he had taken a breath, maybe a shot of scotch, and then said, I thought we had talked about we were going to include the latex purchases from Vandalay Industries. And that's a little Easter egg to Seinfeld fans that's in the book. But that's the example that's, if he had taken the time to do that, it would have avoided all of this chaos that he created because he
Yeah.
hadn't given due consideration to the other. In other words, he was disrespectful to others.
Yeah. So I'm seeing a similar occurrence in a place that I'm supporting right now, and they call it the "Bring Me a Different Rock" syndrome. Right? They keep producing stuff, and the person says, "That's not what I'm looking for. That's not what I look for." Well, give me some guardrails, give me some boundaries, give me some guidelines. Well, I don't know. I just know when I see it, I'll know.
And
No.
if you go back to the definition of trust, which is confident expectation, you're not setting any expectations.
Mm.
So this does damage to trust. It does. And so you're never going to, the steps go respect to trust. You're never going to get to empowerment, and engagement is over the horizon at this point.
Mm.
Yes.
So
So
all these things fit together.
So trust, respect, empowerment, engagement. If, and maybe this is not a question you can answer, but which one do you think organizations or leaders struggle the most with?
Yes.
And also, Tracy, I think it was trust with a swig of whiskey, respect, empowerment, and then engagement.
No. Respect was first.
Oh, respect was first. Respect with a swig of whiskey, then trust, then empowerment.
And the other point that I want to make sure is clear, what makes respect different is it's the only one of those things that you, Elizabeth, you, Tracy, I, John, have complete control over.
Mm.
It's entirely up to me whether or not I treat people with respect. Trust has to do with the relationship. Empowerment is complex, has to do with a lot of other things having been done. Engagement is a result of a lot of other things having been done. Respect is the one thing that every individual and every organization has complete control over.
Mm.
That's why I say respect is the how. That's what leverage is. If you can get people focusing on that, these other things begin to be a little bit more effective. And if each of those connections are a little more effective, by the end, it's a lot more effective.
I like it. The fact that we all have control over that's not a hard thing. It doesn't cost anything. it gets back to just that human interaction that drives everything.
I'm gonna disagree with you there. You said
What?
it's not a hard thing. I think it's simple but hard.
It's free. How's that? It's free, John. Doesn't cost you anything to give respect. I will concede there's probably some difficulty for some of us.
No, but one of the distinctions I always try to make is that something can be simple, simultaneously simple and difficult.
Yes, I would agree.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and it's simple.
That's why we need these books, John.
Give consideration to the other. That's a simple notion. Doing it is difficult. It's also free. You're right.
But the due consideration to others, like I love that because obviously, I don't know if it's obvious, but Tracy and I are in the lean world a lot, and an underpinning is the respect for people. And I feel like to expand on that, to give it a really succinct definition is helpful to people in that realm, trying to get process improvement done. Because you have to start with respect. Yeah.
Yeah, we started out, you asked me why I wrote this book, and I wrote it because I just wanted to get those ideas out and kind of lay them out in this sort of simple heuristic. And I think somebody asked me, well, you want to make a lot of money on this? Well, of course I'd like to make a lot of money on this book, but honest, I'm not being Pollyanna. That's, if I make some money on it, great. But at my age, if people read it and it helps them, I will be happy.
You're clear on your why. I love that, John. And no, it's great. And Tracy, unless you have another question, I wanted to make sure we've get clear for our audience on how they could reach out to John if they want.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. So John, actually, this is a lead in to we're big fans of mistakes because we know that that's kind of how we learn. But John said our books are going to be collector's item because on the side here there's an extra I in Guaspari. So these are going to be worth serious money. John's not going to make much, but Tracy and I on the resell of these books, these rare books.
But because these are print to order, it's already been fixed. So anybody out there, don't try and order them and think you're going to corner the market on these.
Oh no.
Stamps that were printed upside down. This is
guaranteed rare. So John Guaspari, and we're going to put his website, johnguaspari.com, right on the post for this episode. So you can reach out and engage. John's been writing. I always call John the consulting world's Dave Barry. Dave Barry already has his job, and John probably wanted it when he was younger, but then he just turned into our world of Dave Barry. So he's very funny and but also just so succinct on this stuff. I love it. Thank you, John. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, John, for coming to the podcast and the cafe to enlighten our audience. And it's always nice to see you.
Same here.
Thanks for joining me and Tracy's sexy sister for another episode. You are our favorite thing about the Just in Time Cafe, and we look forward to being your lifelong learning partners.
I'm going to tell you right now, we want you to join us next month and every month, but we don't want to invite Tracy's sexy sister anymore. I'm sorry. She's done, hopefully. And hopefully you'll get your monthly jolt of lean caffeine.
Bye, sis.